Greetings, dear viewers. I'm Quill Quickcard, and over the course of this year, I got to play some amazing games. A lot of newer games, a lot of older games, some things I had played before, some things that I hadn't. It has been an absolutely fantastic year on this channel. And I want to commemorate this year by taking a look back and sort of rating, reviewing some of the biggest games that I played on my channel this year. But the question is, how will I do that? Well, luckily, I put together a wheel to help me figure it out. So apparently, the first thing I will be looking at today is Mindustry. And the type of rating or review I will be doing of it is a crazy whiteboard conspiracy. Let's get started. So the first thing I have to do is a crazy whiteboard conspiracy about Mindustry. And I can't do that because, unfortunately, I've stumbled upon the actual conspiracy because I have broken open exactly what is going on in Mindustry. And I can prove it because everything in this game is a massive and vast conspiracy. So, what do we know? First thing we know, originally, in the level Impact 0078 was the first place of the first interstellar transport vessel that entered that system. So the question is, why did they come here? Well, obviously, the only reason you bother with this sort of a thing on an industrial scale is if you're looking for resources. But specifically, what sort of things might they need their resources to do? That's easy. What they need is to produce plastanium, which is used in advanced units, insulation, and fragmentation ammunition. It is an important building structure that's going to be found all across the galaxy. But you know what's important about plastanium? Plastanium is produced with the plastanium compressor, and the compressor produces plastanium from oil and titanium. Industrial scale plastanium production requires oil. So, I believe that they went to this planet expecting to find oil. Now, why would they expect to find oil? Well, we have to consider that one of the things that we definitely know that they had in abundance was coal. And first, let's take a look at the difference between coal and oil. Coal is produced from coalification, where you essentially have dead plant matter in shallow, marshy areas, which eventually gets buried under layers of sediment, deprived of oxygen, and over millions of years, the liquid is sort of leached out of it, and it becomes coal. Oil, on the other hand, is derived from marine creatures, specifically marine creatures. What happens is that marine creatures die, their remains fall to the bottom of the ocean, and are buried under layers and layers and layers of sediment. And ultimately, the pressure of it and the different conditions helps it turn into oil rather than coal. Now, this planet has a crapload of coal all over it, and that means that at some point it had an incredibly rich biosphere, probably full of plant life, although none of that remains today. Oh, believe me, we'll get into that. So I believe that they came to the planet of Serpulo because they saw that it had a lot of coal, this much being very apparent from surface surveys, and assumed that it would in fact have an equally vast supply of oil. The oil, of course, being useful for the production of plastanium. But I think there was a mistake. You see, in order to get the oil, you have to drill. And in Mindustry, you can only get oil from drilling from 4 different terrain types. From shale, sand, dark sand, and whatever the hell that is. I don't remember. It's not really important. The point is, I think they ran into a snag. I think that Serpulo did not have nearly the levels of oil that they expected. But these people, they're just suppliers. Oh yeah, they're just the middlemen. They're contracted to supply the oil to the people who produce the plastanium. So what are they going to do? They have a quota. They have things that they need to meet. And so they have to supply it somehow. And that is where I think they started to screw around. And they did something very bad. And thus, the Spore Conspiracy. At the Biomass Synthesis Facility, we know that this is where they researched and initially produced spores. And what is important about spores? Spore pods are used for conversion into oil, explosives, and fuel. Spore pods are the only other way to easily produce oil. In fact, in the current tech tree, you can only get the ability to make the oil, the plastanium compressor once you have researched the various spore things. So obviously they were creating the spores so that they could mass produce them, so that they could convert them into oil, because they needed them in order to fulfill their contracts for the plastanium. But the spores were very dangerous. They emit gases that are toxic to other biological life. They are extremely invasive. They're highly flammable. They are so invasive that they have even been able to survive in incredibly frigid and difficult environments. And I think that the spores got out of hand. And that is why we can see signs of devastation in coastal areas. I think what happens is that they cultivated the spores everywhere, but then there was an accident on a global scale, and something happened, and the spores caused explosions, wildfires, horrible things. Terrible, horrible things happened to this planet. Over here, at the ruinous shores, past the wastes is a shoreline. Once this location housed a coastal defense array, not much of it remains. Only the most basic defensive structures have remained. Yes, everything else reduced to scrap. And here on the windswept islands, yes, Unswept Islands once had plastanium-producing structures. And why would they have plastanium-producing structures? Because they had oil, which was being made by the spore pods. But then, something horrible happened, and I think the spores got out of hand. They killed all the other life forms on the planet, but the people who are in charge of this planet still need to produce their oil in order to fulfill their contracts for plastanium. And that is all it. It is one big conspiracy. It is a big conspiracy by Big Oil and Big Plastanium, and they are trying to pull the wool over our eyes, and we cannot settle on this any longer. We cannot let this happen. We have to stop them. We have to reveal that they are not, in fact, getting the oil that they need from this planet, and they are doing incredibly dangerous biological research instead. So anyway, that is my crazy whiteboard mindustry conspiracy. Let's move on. Let's move on to our next one. Our next review will be looking at Banjo-Kazooie, and it will be focused on rating the various upgrades in the game. Let's get started. A list of the various powers and upgrades from Banjo-Kazooie and how well they would improve my daily life. Let's get started. The first one we have is the Talon Trot. I got to admit, I don't particularly need to worry about running up like sharp ramps or something all the time. But it does move faster, and it involves being carried. And that honestly just sounds really nice. But I think it really just comes down to being like a minor improvement more than anything else. Like, it's not going to be life-changing, and yeah, I'm not going to want to be seen just being like carried everywhere like a backpack. So I think that's reasonable. The next one, let's look at the Beak Buster. That is the ground pound. Honestly, I cannot think of a single thing in my life that this would really help with, unless I could use it to easily break apart old furniture to easily dispose of. Ooh, that could actually be useful. You know what? I'm gonna say that's actually a minor improvement. Having that would actually be pretty helpful. Next thing, let's look at shooting eggs. Being able to just cough eggs out of my face and launch them as projectiles. I really cannot imagine any way that helps me. Like, I don't have a bunch of things in life that I need to, like, shoot eggs at. I really just think that's just not going to make any change. On the other hand, the ability to shoot eggs from out my butt. Now, again, I can't really think of any practical reason why I would ever benefit from this. But if I had these abilities, at some point, I would test them out of sheer curiosity. And when I test this one, it is going to somehow make my life worse. I feel like my butt is going to be very sore. That egg is larger than Banjo's head. Okay? This is, at best, going to be uncomfortable, and at worst, be actively dangerous. So that one's just going to make life worse. Flying. Flying, absolutely life-changing. That would change the way that I live my life. I mean, there's obviously just no way you can even argue that, realistically. It's just a fantastic power. However, related to that, we have the Beak Bomb. The ability while you're flying to just launch yourself forward and impact things. This ability has killed me multiple times while playing Banjo-Kazooie in my life. This is just actively dangerous. Like, yeah, the flying's probably pretty dangerous, but this one is actually liable to just kill me. So we're gonna throw that all the way down into oh god no tier. Next up, this little picture here. You may think this is a pretty weird one, and it is. These are the Spring Shock pad jumps, where you've got those green pads and you hold down the jump button and then you jump high into the air. I do not live near, spring jump pads, so that is not going to do anything for me whatsoever. The Wonder Wing, being able to turn myself completely immune to harm on command. That is a really good power. And if I had that power, there are probably certain things that I would do that I can't do now. And yet, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any. There's no way that this won't be at least a minor improvement, but there's not like anything I'm doing or need to do on a regular basis that is going to be improved by being able to turn myself invincible. I'm sure my life would change, but I cannot necessarily say that change would inherently be an improvement. But it definitely, I would find, like, small little things to do with. Like, I could just flip myself invincible when grabbing food out of the oven, I don't have to turn around and put on an oven mitt. Simple things like that. It would be a minor improvement. Next up, the wading boots. Just being able to walk through, like, toxic or dangerous liquids without getting hurt. This will contribute nothing. This will actually do nothing to my life. This is not something that I do regularly. It's not going to make a difference. Next, the running shoes. Okay, the running shoes make you very fast, which is really cool, and being really fast can be good. I am 100% going to run into stuff or trip and fall. These are going to get me injured. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever in any way that these will not lead to me being hurt. And with those out of the way, let's move on to Mumbo's transformations. First up, we've got the termite power. So the main thing with the termite is being able to just walk on extremely steep ramps. Again, that doesn't really seem like something that's going to improve my life. I'm trying to think of any way that the termite's ability to go up ramps would help me. And I cannot think of a single one. It can walk underwater, I guess. I really can't think of any way that this is going to help me. I just can't. Moving on to the next one, we have the crocodile. Okay, turning into a crocodile. So I can walk underwater. I apparently can stay underwater indefinitely. Dangerous liquids don't hurt me. I have the ability to chomp on things. It would let me fit into smaller spaces. I feel like this would be at least a minor improvement. I think that's a fair position. There's a lot of very little things that might be improved by just having, like, you know, temporary access to massively increased bite strength, or just a smaller size, or something like that. But I don't think it's going to be major. I don't think it's going to be life-changing. But I think it's fair to say that that would be a minor improvement. Next up, the Walrus from Freeze Easy Peak. Okay, so complete immunity to cold water, fit into smaller places, hop around a bit. I really don't think this is going to help. Like, I don't regularly have to deal with, you know, thigh-deep, freezing cold water, which is, like, the only situation where this might be helpful. There's just no change. Okay, next up, the Pumpkin from Mad Monster Mansion. Alright, this is going into Oh God No. And let me explain my justification. First off, there is nothing this pumpkin is going to allow me to do that I can't already do, besides getting into small spaces. The bigger problem is that when the pumpkin jumps, the top of it jumps and actually comes off the head before landing back down on top. At some point, I am going to lose that cap. And I don't know exactly what the rules of transfiguration are in this scenario, but I feel like losing a part of your body while transformed is going to have very serious consequences, which is why we're going to say, oh God, no. And finally, we have the bee. The bee can fly forever. Without needing to consume any red feathers or anything like that. It is, frankly, pretty much better than the way that Kazooie can fly. It can even just, like, hover in place if you know what you're doing. The bee is the best. Except for the noise it makes, which is barely tolerable while playing the game. And if it is something you had to listen to for like 20 to 30 minutes at a time as you fly around to different locations, I think it would actually drive me crazy. However, even if it was annoying, I cannot deny that it would be a major improvement. And so there we go. The various Banjo-Kazooie upgrades and transformations rated by how well they would improve my life. Let's move on. Our next review will be looking at Hexen. Okay. And what exactly will we be rating? For Hexen, we will be doing... Okay. A smash or pass that will be focused on the game's what? The protagonists. Okay. It won't be a long list, but it can be done. So I have to do a smash or pass for Hexen's protagonists. That means exactly 3 people. Baratus the Fighter, Parias the Cleric, and Daedalon the Mage. So we want to make sure that I get this right. So let's really deep dive into this and consider the pros and cons. Baratus, tall, muscular man, likes to wear armor that is covered in spikes. He's got high speed. He really doesn't have much magic. He's fairly efficient with his mana. His weapons are not the most exciting bunch, but he does have the gauntlets, the axe, the hammer, and the sword. He can get a lot of armor. So Baratus can definitely take a beating. I think that's probably the most important thing about Baratus, is that he's going to have the stamina for whatever activities we might be pursuing. I do worry that the lack of magic might indicate, like, a little bit less of an imagination, which could be a limiting factor in the bedroom. But let's look at our other options before we make any decisions. We've got Parias the Cleric. He is a cleric, so he's got, like, formal religious training. A stalwart soldier of the church. I did do my playthrough with Parias, and I do like his weapons the most. The Wrath Verge is one of the best weapons ever to be included in a first-person game. Firestorm is really fun. Serpent Staff and the Mace are a fair bit more, not quite as exciting, but they're okay. Let's really think about it. Yes, Parias is very well-rounded. You know, you're not going to get the absolute best out of Parias, but he is at least really going to be able to give you, like, a satisfying amount in all of his pursuits. You know, he's going to have the stamina, he's going to have the creativity, he's going to have the power. I'm sure he's well fit underneath that armor. The real issue, it might become an issue, though, with his religious background. That is a possibility. We don't really know much about how the religion in this world worked, but I would assume in general that this would give a more conservative bent toward his ideologies, toward his, ways of thinking. Might not necessarily be as open-minded. Let's look at our third option and think about it. Daedalon the Mage. So, we really don't know much about Daedalon. He's definitely got the drip. That cloak looks absolutely great. He's not very fast. He doesn't really have the strength or the toughness. But all that magical power really speaks to, like, a power of intellect, of, an ability to learn, and imagination, willpower. And those can all be, very attractive qualities in and of themselves. I do like Daedalon's weapons. He has what, at least to me personally, is the least interesting ultimate weapon. With the Blood Scourge, just like 3 homing rockets. The Arc of Death is really cool. Frost Shards, I never really liked it much. A lot of times it can just, like, freeze people in the way. Sapphire Wand is fantastic. Like, ranged attacks without having mana is really good. So, what else can we think about a mage? It's also probably going to be a bit more maybe rigid in their thinking. Perhaps. It's really hard to know since we don't have a good sense of, like, the world building to go. Based on pure body, obviously we've got to give the advantage to Baratus. I mean, just look at that. Pariah seems like the most likely to actually be, like, a satisfying partner, but there is that potential issue of how their church upbringing and training might feed into the difficulties of having, like, a meaningful connection and relationship. And Daedalon's got, like, that mysterious, mystery to him, which can be very appealing. But he's going to be, like, the least capable in, like, a purely physical sense, And that brings it down to a hard decision. Who do we smash, and who do we pass? I'm going to give a smash to Baratus. I simply don't think we have any good reason to pass on Baratus. And likewise, while it's a lot closer, but I think I'm going to pass on Parias. And the main thing here is, I think I have a sense that they would be probably the most dull of the 3 characters. So, Parias is going to be a pass. So with 1 smash and 1 pass, that just leaves Daedalon. Oof. Okay. So, the only thing we really know about their physical appearance or capability is that they are significantly slower and weaker than the other two. But that's not necessarily an indicator that they would be an unsatisfactory partner. I guess maybe I need to approach this from a different angle. Is there any reason I can think of why Daedalon would not be a good partner? The only one that really comes to mind is a possible physical limitation. But aside from that, I think the mystery is a cool aspect. Magic could be interesting. You know what? Daedalon is a smash. Alright, it took a while, but we got there. For the Hexen Smasher Pass with protagonists, Baratus is a smash, Parias is a pass, and Daedalon is a smash. Let's move on to our next review. And for our next look back at stuff I have played this year, we will be focusing on the Hydlide games. Okay? And more specifically, it will be a Minecraft build, somehow relating to Hydlide. Okay, I think I can make that work. A Hydlide Minecraft build. Well, better get started. Honestly, that's pretty good. Behold, Jim the Knight in all his glory. You know, that is a pretty good Jim the Knight, if I do say so myself. Of course, the entire point of this exercise is to kind of reflect on the games I've played, you know, maybe offer that's a good-looking Jim the Knight, if I do say so myself. But Part of the point of this whole exercise was to provide some kind of evaluation and meaningful reflection on the games that I played this year. So I do think that I should take this opportunity to maybe express some of my thoughts about the Hydlide series. So yeah, I think that'll probably cover it pretty well. Let's just sit back and enjoy the show. Jim, your eyeball appears to be on fire. That is probably very uncomfortable. Yeah, no, that definitely isn't looking great. Of course, we gotta make sure we're thorough. Well, I think that pretty well represents my feelings about the Hydlide series. Yeah. Our next look will be at Sacrifice. Okay, had a lot of fun playing Sacrifice this year. And for Sacrifice, it will be rating locations. All right, let's get started. So we are doing a location review for the game Sacrifice. I'm going to be just sort of discussing the positives and the negatives of living in these different areas. Specifically Elysium, the Glebe, Stygia, Pyroborea, Imperia, all of course laid out here. Let's take a look. So we start here in Elysium. Elysium is very much a grassland. It sort of refers to itself more as like a forest, but honestly, the forest in Elysium is a fair bit sparser than one might expect. There's definitely more trees than you'd find elsewhere, but I definitely wouldn't call Elysium a forest. It's more just like nice, open, pastoral plains. A lot of rich farmland, clean skies. Honestly, pretty nice overall. Once you remove all of like the godly politics from it, Elysium is probably actually a very, very, very nice, very comfortable place to live overall. I gotta say though, I don't even know what it is, but there is something about Elysium that doesn't really appeal to me personally in terms of like a place that I would want to live. And I genuinely can't even really put my finger on what that is. There's just something about it I don't quite mesh with. And I've never really understood why. It looks perfectly peaceful. It looks very livable. I don't know. Maybe it's like there still seems to be something foreboding about the sky, maybe. It just I don't know. Like, I'm sure I'd be comfortable there, but I think I'd be kind of nervous and anxious to live in Elysium. Moving on, we have the Glebe, the domain of the god of Earth, James. The Glebe is very much scrubland, desert. It's a much more rugged place, and yet not really necessarily like a bad place. Like there there are villages all throughout the glebe, and the people seem happy and peaceful. Living in Colorado, I sort of have an interesting feel, because I basically, I live short ways away from, like, pastoral plains, as well as, more, like, arid scrublands. Of course, there's a forest up in the mountains. There's, the alpine environments where it's colder. So, I regularly see all these things, and I have to admit, in all honesty, I think of all the places in the game, I might actually be most comfortable if I lived in the glebe. I'm sure it wouldn't be the easiest life, but I kind of like these open stretches of arid scrubland. I think they have a special charm to them, And the people seem nice enough. I think I could actually enjoy it quite a bit. The next one we're going to look at is Imperia. These are the snow-capped mountains and the tundra fields of the god Stratos. Of course, voiced by the great Tim Curry. Now, I will always have a soft spot for snowy mountain environments. I really will. I love that stuff. Imperia looks pretty peaceful. While it's definitely got all the snow and the ice, it still gets plenty of sun. It would probably be, honestly, like, decently warm. Probably somewhere in the 20s or 30s. Somewhere where the temperature is going to be livable and comfortable with some good layers without being, like, absolutely brutal. I don't expect that it would just be, like, an absolutely frigid nightmare. But at the same time, given the environment and given the god ruling over it, I feel like there'd probably be a lot of wind. And I really don't like being around a lot of wind. I never have. It makes me uncomfortable. I have a very minor phobia involving the wind, and I just feel like these wind-swept reaches would be not a great place for me. So I think I have to rate Imperia even lower than Elysium. So Glebe, definitely where I'd prefer to be. Elysium under that, Imperia underneath that. But, of course, it could always be worse. It could be Pyroborea. The scorched and scrapped landscapes of Pyroborea, the name of the god of fire and industry, Pyro. And, if anything, just looking at the sky makes it very clear what sort of place this is. It's polluted, it's ashy, I just don't think Pyroborea would be a particularly good place to live. It doesn't look particularly comfortable, and yet, a lot of the plant life you find in Pyroborea definitely suggests that it's actually more tropical. And if anything, that makes it worse, because tropical climates and I do not mix well. I think Pyroborea has to go on the bottom of the list for the locations we've looked at so far. But there is still the domain of the god of death, Charnel, and his domain of Stygia. A lot of it is this kind of like dry desert landscape. The ground almost looks like cracked, almost like it's scabbed over. It has a very strong, like, kind of organic feel to it. Enough that I seriously wonder if that's dirt or flesh. It kind of has some resemblance to the Nether in terms of its terrain. There's a lot of insects, and I don't think that would be particularly pleasant. But in terms of being livable, I think if you could get past all that, there actually are a fair amount of plant life in Stygia. Most obviously here in the form of these kind of like twisting spires that go up into the sky. There's also a lot of bushes and shrubs. Like there clearly is the means to grow and maintain plant life at a significant volume within the lands of Stygia. So I think if I had to pick between living in Stygia or living in Pyroborea, I think I would still prefer Stygia over Pyroborea. And the sky, the air looks so much better. Like, I think the temperature would probably be better than Imperia. The air would be cleaner than Pyroborea. I genuinely think Stygia is right on par with Imperia. I think those two are tied for third best place to live for me right now. Weirdly enough. But that does leave one final area. The Ethereal Realm. The realm where the gods interact with their followers and where, you know, you sort of go to in between missions. It's absolutely beautiful. And you really can't deny that the Ethereal Realm has this gorgeous look to it. And the mountains are beautiful. You can see the base of that large rock spire in the background. That is actually part of a full arch that absolutely dwarfs anything else in Sacrifice in terms of its sheer size. It is absurdly massive, and being able to be there and to gaze up upon that would probably be really, really cool. That being said, however, this really is not a place where people are meant to live. This is not a place for mortals to inhabit, and I really don't think you'd be able to eke out a comfortable life here, even if you didn't always have to listen to the gods bickering with each other. So I think I'm going to have to rate this. I think I would rather be here, though, than Pyroborea, because at least the air is nice and clean. So it looks like my order for the locations from Sacrifice in terms of where I'd want to live is the Glebe in the number 1 spot, Elysium in the number 2 spot, a tie in the number 3 spot between Imperia and Stygia, neither of which I think would be particularly comfortable, but I think would still be better than the Ethereal Realm at number 4, or Pyroborea at the very bottom of the list. And, yeah, I think that does it for Sacrifice. So let's move on. Alright, the games list is starting to get thin. But next, I'm going to take a look at the most recent game I finished, Metroid Prime 4. And for Metroid Prime 4, I will be doing various graphs. Okay, I think I can do that. Let's get started. Various graphs for Metroid Prime 4. Let's start with this one. This is going to be a comparison of expected versus actual enjoyment on a scale from 1 to 10 of various sections of the game throughout my experience with it. So first we're going to mark out the expected enjoyment. Here at the GF base in the tutorial, I figured, you know, tutorial areas are kind of meh. I mean, you know, it's a lot of, like, there's a lot of, like, things that are supposed to kind of, like, just kind of grab your attention, you know, teach a few mechanics. see how I inevitably lose my powers, that sort of thing. Generally, I think things really pick up when you get to like the first major area in a Metroid Prime game. So I did have some high expectations for Fury Green for this first area, when I really got to it. The Volt Forge, from the moment I got there, I was actually like really hyped. Like just this stormy electrical zone. I thought I was going to have a great time there. Ice areas, I didn't really expect I would enjoy it as much, but maybe down to like around a 6 is about where I was expecting for the Ice Belt. The fire areas in Metroid games, they have a lot of atmosphere, but I've never really enjoyed playing them a lot. So I think it's fair to say my expectation was, around a 5. When I realized that the last area we were going to, when I realized that huge platform out in the desert wasn't like some kind of a platform that was going to, I don't know, take me up into like a sky or a satellite or a station or something, but it was actually just an elevator platform going down, I really didn't have like particularly high hopes for that. And that's about where I expected to be as I got through like, the in-game exploration and collection. Toward the end game though, I kind of figured, this is probably going to be like where we see a lot of cool stuff, where I'm going to like learn some more about Sylux. By this time I was a little soured on the experience, but I still had some real hopes for it. And now with that out of the way, let's map how my actual experience was. And you know what? Right at the start, the GF base actually did get me pretty hyped. We're going to start that at around a 6. I enjoyed it. The visual was fun. It felt fun to get back into new Metroid Prime content. Fury Green, it introduced Mackenzie. And I had concerns off the bat, but honestly, I would say we were at like a pretty solid 6 at that point up through Fury Green. Like I really did. Volt Forge, I didn't have a bad time with it, but this was where I first became concerned at the overall design of the areas altogether, as I realized that all I had done was go down to the bottom of a tower and then fight my way back, and then I had to do that twice, and I really did not enjoy having that experience 2 times in a row. As we got to the Ice Belt, I had a fantastic time in the Ice Belt. The Ice Belt, the atmosphere of it, the visuals, everything. The Ice Belt is the absolute highlight of this game. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. And to be honest, I actually kind of rode that high through the Flare Pool. I thought the Flare Pool was actually pretty interesting. It approached the design, a little bit differently than I had anticipated. The boss at the end was really cool. I actually enjoyed the Flare Pool quite a bit more than I expected. The Great Mine section, however, honestly, by the time I was in the Great Mine, it felt like a slog. And it was very apparent quickly that we were basically just doing like the stupid cliched, all of our companions are going to sacrifice themselves one after another, oh no, they're fine, sort of thing. Seen it before. I thought it was a little bit of a cringy cliche the first time I saw Tales of Symphonia do it, and that was back on the GameCube, okay? It can be done well. This was not it being done well. The actual in-game exploration and collection, though, as I went back to get all of my power-ups, I actually enjoyed that. I actually enjoyed that quite a fair bit. Like I had a really good time doing that. It was not nearly as tedious as I had worried that it would be. But then once we actually get into the Chrono Tower, like I'm real excited. I'm expecting this is going to be like a big in-game. That there's going to be a lot of stuff here. We have literally been inside the Chrono Tower. We have seen that it is filled with Cybots. Just absolutely stacked with Cybots. Obviously, there's going to be like a huge battle that goes on here. No, there's not. We'll crank it up. I will give it a 4. Okay, the final battle, it was okay, but in the end, we did not learn anything meaningful about Sylux. We had yet another instance of party sacrifice for no real reason. It just really didn't work out. And looking at this charted out, it's actually interesting. If you kind of average it out, if you kind of drew a line of like an average between like an expected and an actual enjoyment level, overall the game actually did pretty well within like my expectations. And I do tend to think that I do go into games with relatively rational and grounded expectations. So while there were definitely some issues with this game, and it definitely didn't live up to the heights I would have hoped it would, it did not do terribly in regards to disappointing what I had anticipated. So I think that's one of the reasons I was able to walk away from it and say, okay, this is an 8 out of 10 experience, relative to all other games. A geography chart in order to show some different pieces of information regarding Soul Valley in Metroid Prime 4. So the very first thing we are going to do is I am going to mark the areas where I consistently had the most trouble running into enemies. So honestly, right up here was a very major issue for enemies. This is not necessarily like reflecting the density of the enemies that I was encountering. This is not like an objective measure of where the most are, but this is a measure of where it was the most annoying to run into them, simply because of the terrain and traversing it. And really right up here, in between the entrance to Fury Green and the Ice Belt, ceaselessly annoying. Another really big area is here. This area in between Fury Green, Volt Forge, and the Flare Pool, this is a path you're going to be going through multiple times throughout the game, and it is just an incredibly annoying area where you're getting bombarded by enemies. It's very, very much an issue. And finally, one of the more annoying areas is right up here. There is genuinely nothing whatsoever of interest in this area. You are purely traveling to or from the Great Mine area, maybe to hit the little Galactic Federation base up here, or maybe you're going to circle around to get to another one. This is just a terrible area, and we're always being attacked by enemies, and odds are you're still probably a fair way away from your destination. You're either just going to have to ride past them or ignore them. Very, very annoying. The next area that I am going to mark are the places that I really think were, genuinely the best areas in all of Soul Valley. And I think, genuinely, hold on, which is, yeah. I genuinely think that the entrance to the Ice Belt is decent. I think it's one of the better areas in Soul Valley. It's very easy to find it, unless you know that you're specifically looking for the two big statues outside of Fury Green. It doesn't really stand out. It's very easy to notice when you're getting close to the place with the ice belt. I like that, I like going around and in, and then there's like the gondola area. I just thought that this was a nice little area, pretty enjoyable, honestly. Next, another area in Soul Valley that I actually enjoyed a fair bit was this Galactic Federation base right here. I actually liked it. There was like 2 or 3 things at that base that you could actually interact with in order to get stuff. I thought that was honestly pretty nice. And honestly, that's basically it. Like there's pretty much no other part in the entirety of Soul Valley that I thought was like actually well designed. And let me just make a small change here. I don't really need another blue. So let's just take away all the blue. Let's make it more yellow and green. It's not really... There we go. Okay, here's a nice yellow. Now I am going to mark the worst areas in all of Fury Green. The places that are just objectively the most annoying. And first off, right here, the entrance to Fury Green. This sucks. You ride in your bike, you have to get off your bike, you have to go up the stairs, you will be attacked by wasps before you can make it up the stairs. Then you have to go through a door into a short cutscene, which loads, which then gets you to the room where you take the transporter, which you then launch yourself over to Fury Green with, which triggers another cutscene. And when you're coming back, again, transporter, you have a cutscene, go through it, walk through a door, another cutscene, you have to travel a little way before you reach the ground, and then you can get on your bike. This is just absurd. This is just not an acceptable way to build something like this. It is terrible, and you have to go through that more than a dozen times throughout the course of this game. By the end of it, you will hate this point of transition just as much as I did. And finally, we have one last thing that we need to look at. We need to look at where you can really get green energy crystals. Like all the places you should really go to find green energy crystals. So there, and there, and there, and there, and there, and somehow merged those two. I don't know how I did that. And here, and here. Are you beginning to see the problem? Ironically, one of the weird things is that this like big open circle in the middle, which, was very clearly kind of telegraphed to be like a boss arena, but then they actually did something really sneaky by having it be exactly what you expected it to be and be a boss arena. They could have put anything else there. Anything at all. And they just decided not to. The whole green energy crystal thing is one of the worst, weakest parts of this entire game experience, and it really suffers because of it. Okay, let's move on. Down to the last three. And the next one is going to be looking at Fantasy Life I, the girl who steals time. And more specifically, I will be doing... Okay, I will be making a scale for how good of a roommate characters would be. But what type of characters? It's down to either antagonists or neutral characters, and it will be... Alright, a roommate scale with the neutral characters. Let's get started. Alright, let's look at the neutral characters from Fantasy Life I, the girl who steals time, and rate them by how good or bad of a roommate they would be. To qualify, it has to be a character that at no point actively parties with you or directly fights against you. So most of these are vendors, life masters, merchants, those sorts of things. Let's get started. Okay, first up we've got Archie, the archer or hunter life master. I feel like they'd probably track in a lot of dirt, but on the other hand, they can protect the place. They're probably relatively self-reliant. I think it would be good. I think that's good enough. Next up, Boyle, the first of our plushling helpers at base camp. So Boyle handles like islander management type of stuff. So a lot of focus just on like, you know, good logistical skills, very orderly. You know, honestly, probably very good to have around. Do they qualify as perfect, though? Is it a perfect living situation? I think it could get a little annoying at times. We're going to call it another good living situation. Next up, we have Colm. Colm handles the multiplayer stuff. He seems very social focused. You know, likes the donuts. Probably gonna get like donut stuff, the donut icing everywhere. Especially if he's having like Krispy Kremes or something. He's probably gonna be like bringing over people. I'm just not in. I just don't think that's gonna be a good situation. Okay, next up we've got Cookie. This one sort of handles like island improvement type stuff, changes to the island, relocations. They'd probably be interested in like constantly moving things around, changing up the place. I've put up with so much of that kind of crap throughout my life. I don't want to do it again. But outside of that, I don't really think it would be too bad. Let's say it would be tolerable. I think that is an acceptable interpretation. Next on the list, we have Kuna, the Paladin Life Master. So she's very strong, very oriented on like service to others, helping other people, trying to keep things orderly, strong, defensive, or defensively minded, not really like a defensive person. Having someone with paladin skills around, I feel like they'd be willing to they'd be willing to compromise, they'd be willing to work on stuff. Honestly, I think this is almost ideal. Like someone who doesn't really have any personality quirks that are really going to cause any issues, and who's trying to be an active member of the home. I think that's great. Next, we move on to Leafa. Leafa is a singer among the Leafy people. They're just gonna be making noise all the time, or they're gonna be having friends over. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. That's just a bad living situation. Okay, Marco. Marco handles the base camp shop, but he also sells loot boxes. And even if they are purely accessed by in-game currency that you can earn in-game, and there's no microtransactions, I have literally been playing this game since release, and I have not gotten any of the special things from his goddamn loot boxes. It is an actively dangerous living situation. Not because I'm worried I might go crazy on the gambling, but because I am genuinely worried I might strangle this man. So, yeah, that is actively dangerous for Marco. Next on the list, we've got Meralda. Meralda is the mining life master. The miner life master. She's got a boy that likes her, so he's probably going to be over a fair bit. I don't really like having people over a lot, and it's probably gonna be a mess. Like, she's gonna come home from the mines, it's gonna be, like, dirty, it's gonna be filthy, there's gonna be, like, dirt everywhere. I mean, don't get me wrong, I quite enjoy rocks and minerals and gemstones. I just feel like it's gonna be kind of a mess, and I don't get the sense that she is going to be the most adept at keeping it all clean. Nevertheless, do I want to say it's an actively bad situation or just tolerable? I think it would have annoying elements, but I don't think it would actively bother me on a day-to-day basis. I think we're going to put this into tolerable. Next up, we have Oz. It's a little hard to see there, so let me just... Whoops. Let me just bring this up. So Oz is a cat. Oz is a talking magical cat. They are the magician life master. So they've got magical skills. They're in an accomplished position of leadership. They can teach well. They're a cat. Honestly, this is just a perfect living situation. Who wouldn't want to live with a magic talking cat, you know? Next up, we've got Polo. Polo is another merchant. Specifically, he is a merchant that you can access while you have multiplayer active. And he sells a lot of just like basic consumables that you might need. I don't really have any other issue with him. I honestly don't really have much to judge him by, to be honest. I think Polo would be... it might be a good living situation, but at the very least, at the very low end, I think it would be tolerable. So we're going to rate that by the lowest possible, and that's going to put him into tolerable. Okay, next up we got Rinoa. Rinoa is the king. Rinoa's got, like, his cute sister. Honestly, I think this is the point where I have to put I am the liability here. Like, there is nothing about our living situation, the difference in our relative power or wealth, where I'm really going to be able to contribute anything meaningfully. Like, I am the liability here if I am the roommate of the king. Okay? That's a problem. And if he thinks I'm being rude to his sister, he might have me killed. Like, I'm clearly the liability in this situation. Next up on the list, we have got... what was her name? Sue. Sue is the Taylor Life Master. I feel like there's going to be a lot of thread lying around. There might be, like, needles lying around. She looks like she's relatively older. She might kind of try and baby a little bit. Like, I don't know, like she's my grandma or something. I don't feel like I'd want to live in that situation. So we're going to put her in a bad living situation, unfortunately. Next up is Kimmel, the alchemist life master. Basically kind of a mad scientist type. One way or another, this is an actively dangerous situation. Like, there are going to be fumes, there's going to be explosions, it's going to be bad. Not to mention if they're trying to do any of their life master stuff from, you know, inside the home, there's going to be a lot of apprentice alchemists in there too. This is genuinely dangerous. Next up, we got Kokot, the cook life master. So, big lady, knows how to cook, knows how to make some of the most delicious dishes that exist. Honestly, I would be perfectly happy with that. I don't mind cooking either. I actually like cooking quite a bit. I'm sure she'd be happy to eat my cooking as well. I mean, she is the life master. She deals with people who are just starting out and aren't very good. I'm sure she could appreciate some of the meals I can make. I think this would be a very good living situation. This brings us up to Daiku. Daiku is the carpenter life master. So right off the bat, you know, someone who knows how to build and how to fix things. Probably very effective as like a handyman having around. And that's always a great thing to do, you know. Plus, having people around who are kind of passionate. I am assuming that he is probably not going to be doing his woodworking in the home. If he does, that's just going to be a mess, but unlike the tailor, I really don't think he would do it. Like, generally you're going to want a specialized workspace for that anyway. So, under the assumption that he is not doing his carpentry work in the house, I think this is really, like, a pretty perfect living situation. Next up, we are moving on to Gramps. Gramps is the fishing life master. I've been around enough people who were really into fishing. I don't have an interest in that. I've never really vibed with that. It's just not something I want to be around a lot. I'm gonna just call that a bad living situation. I'm not into the fishing. I don't like being around the people who are super into fishing. This is really just more of a personal issue from life experience. it's judgmental, but it's just the way I feel. Next up, we have Inaji. He is the farmer life master. Kind of a grumpy older guy. Loves vegetables, maybe even a little bit too much. On the other hand, I am really fond of vegetables. Like, I rarely have fruit, but I love vegetables. Having someone around who can bring out the best in vegetables actually sounds pretty good. Living with someone that much older than me, though, might be kind of awkward. I don't know how much we mesh in our hobbies and whatnot. I think I would call it a tolerable living situation, but it's on the higher end of tolerable. Like, I think there'd be enough annoying elements that I can't quite call it good, but honestly, Inaji is probably like the very best of the tolerable living situations. Moving on, we have Leela. She is the woodcutter life master. A master lumberjack. Wait, was it her who had the guy crushing on her and not Merle? I can't remember. Hard to say. I can't really think of any reason it would be a bad situation. I can't really think of a situation that it would be particularly good. I mean, she's definitely got, like, bodily strength and physicality to her. You really need those sort of things if you're going to be a woodcutter professionally. And it's always good to have people around who can be more physically active. Also, she's kind of cute. Screw it. We'll just say that that's a good living situation. Next, Marcin, the mercenary life master. A warrior by trade. Does what he can to try and help people. I think I get the feeling from him being a plushling and just, the mercenary boss in general, he's got, like, a little bit of a rough edge. Not a particularly sharp rough edge, but a little bit of a rough edge. I think it would be a tolerable living situation with him. Next up, that goes to Paulette. Paulette is the artist life master. And honestly, I don't think I want to be living with someone who is as much into like painting and drawing as she is, just on a day-to-day basis. She uses a lot of physical media. I feel like, it's gonna get dirty around. It's gonna get kind of messy. I don't feel I can particularly relate to her interests very effectively. I don't think it's going to be, like, a really good situation for me, and I don't think she's gonna get much out of it either, so this is just a bad living situation. And finally, we have the Dawn. The Dawn, he is the wandering merchant of Ginormosia, big into trade. Right off the bat, he is a very big man, and he's like a bear or wolf or something. Like, it's gonna take up a lot of space having him around. We would really need to live in a house that's, more suited toward his size and his scale. I don't think that's a particularly good living situation either. So here it is. This is my final tier list for the neutral characters of Fantasy Life and how good of roommates I think they would be. Looking at this list right now, I realize I am missing the Blacksmith Life Master. But we'll just say it's gonna be tolerable living with him, assuming he's not doing his stuff in the house. So, alright, I think that's a pretty good look at Fantasy Life I. Let's move on. That just leaves two more. So the penultimate review or rating or whatever will be for Silksong. Okay. And specifically for Silksong, I will be making an alignment chart. Alright. And specifically, as it is the only one left, it will be an alignment chart based off of Silksong's antagonists. An alignment chart for the antagonists of Hollow Knight Silksong. I've grabbed some antagonists. Let's get started. So first, we've got Widow. From the one who was taking over Bellheart. So right away, that kind of action immediately makes me think more on the lawful side. And definitely that would qualify as an evil act, dominating all those poor bugs' wills. So I think we're solidly in the lawful evil. It's really just a question of how lawful evil are they. It's pretty evil. I think it's only a bit up on the lawful scale. I think here is a good place for Widow. Okay, next up, Last Judge. Alright, this guy is an absolute ass. Absolutely hated this boss. This was the boss that officially flipped my switch and made me conclude cheating my way through this game was entirely acceptable. Simply by their name, Last Judge, we can assume we're going up onto the lawful side of the scale. The question is, where do they fit along the good and evil axis? I don't necessarily see a sign that they are clearly under the direct control of the Silk. It seems more like they are fulfilling some kind of a function that they are intended to. So, if that is the case, then I think, honestly, they're much more on the neutral side between good and evil. They seem to just be kind of doing their job, but at the same time, they're not attacking people randomly. They're attacking a specific group of people who are coming there, but they're also not doing anything to help the Citadel clear its very obvious problems. So I think they're right on, right in the middle, right in the neutral section. And I think they're fairly high on a lawful bent as well. Next up, we've got Trobio! Our beloved Trobio, immediately definitely more on the chaotic side of things. It seems that for all their vanity, Trobio is actually trying to do something that is going to be to the benefit of the Citadel. Something that's actually going to be beneficial for anyone who is still left. It gives me a sense of chaotic good. But clearly not good enough that they're putting, a great deal of effort into it. I think definitely lower on the chaotic side of things. I think here is probably a good spot for Trobio. Next up, the Phantom. Oh, yeah, this guy hiding out at the end of the mist, playing the organ deep underneath the Citadel, gives our lovely Hornet the ability to parry. There's really not much to go on for this guy, so we're gonna have to consider just kind of the vibes on this. The musical associations, the high skill and expertise of the combat certainly suggest something more on the Waffle side. It doesn't really strike me as evil. Like, wasn't really out there causing any specific trouble, unless you're really going looking for them, I think. I think, however, he also, as soon as you show up, just, decides he's gonna murder you, which is fairly evil. I think it's lighter on the evil, lower on the lawful. I think Phantom is closest of anyone we've looked to so far to be close to actual neutrality. Next up, this is Loyal Mergwyn. This is the son of a bitch who gives you the quest for the Pale Oil. This man is a horrible person. I hate him. But, despite my hatred, he does seem to be trying to do something beneficial in the service to his master. He seems to be approaching it in an orderly way. He's not, near as I can tell, as annoying as the quest is, not actually trying to bring about any kind of malicious effect. I think I kind of have to give him lawful good, as much as I truly, truly despise him. Just, I hate this guy, but I really can't justify anything other than a very low foray into lawful good. Next up, Grawl the Great, however the hell it's supposed to be said. The Lord of Bilewater. Everything relating to Bilewater is evil. As evil as it possibly could be. We are just going to put him all the way here, neutral evil. I don't see any particular sign that he is intentionally chaotic or lawful. He's just in Bilewater, and he's an asshole. Next up, just for the hell of it, we've got the Crawfather. The Master of the Craws. We are now moving on to Act 3 of the game. So, Crawfather, first off, I think, again, we have to bend toward lawful right off the bat. He's definitely in, a leadership position, an organized group. The Craws were even kind enough to dispatch, a formal notice for their intention to fight Hornet. Definitely evil. I think we can solidly say more on the lawful evil side. I think here is probably a decent place for the Crawfather. Maybe not quite as far evil. They don't seem to be causing as much malicious harm as Widow. And they're also not from Bilewater. I think that's a good spot. Okay. Next up, we have Scar Singer Carmelita, or whatever the heck her name is. The Queen of the Ants. The Queen of the Hunter, or something similar to that in her own time. So, we know that she's a dancer. We know that she was very beloved by the ants. We know that our fight with her seems to be very much more of like a... I wouldn't really say it's like an antagonistic encounter. So we don't really have too much to go on for ranking her. She seems to have been well liked by the ants. My sense is probably more chaotic, maybe? I don't know. I think kind of just like a fairly close to neutral. There's not really a good sense of it, I think. I'm going to put her here, a little bit into the good scale. Not really lawful or chaotic. I think that's fine. Crust King Khan. This guy seems to lead an entire organized military force. It seems that the people of the Coral Tower were among the last forces fighting against the Citadel. That immediately makes me think more on the good side of the chart. It's between lawful and chaotic. I'm inclined to think... Generally, a much more heavily organized force like that, even the state of, like, their tomb, suggests to me more of a lawful. I really think gotta give this a lawful good. I think we can put Crust King Khan solidly up here in lawful good. So let's move on to Nihileth, another one of the big souls that you can go find in Act 3, which seems to be associated with life and with growth. Life and growth... I don't really have much I can say about Nihileth. I don't really have much I can say to justify it, but I think it fits more with a chaotic aspect overall, just kind of like unchecked natural growth. Probably good as well, maybe a little bit, but definitely closer to neutral. I think this is where we're going to put Nihileth. Next up, Greyroot. Yeah, this thing is straight up evil. Whatever this creature is, whether it is a victim of the Greyroot parasite, or whether it is itself an actual mature version of this strange parasitic life form, very clearly intentionally acts out to infect Hornet. So definitely on the evil side, especially if it has an understanding of the kind of suffering and damage it could potentially cause to the world. The real question is, do I call that chaotic or lawful? I think I've got to give that to chaotic. Not all the way, it's not just a frothing berserk force of annihilation, but This is probably one of the more, like, actual insidious scheming evils that exists in this world. Next up, we are going to go with Grandmother Silk. So, definitely it is an evil force. I think Grandmother Silk might be all the way up there in lawful evil. There's a definite organization, a definite thought and intention behind its actions, which has a specifically malicious purpose in the form of domination and control. I think that fits great for lawful evil. And finally, we will end with Lace herself. Where do we put Lace on this chart? I do not think Lace qualifies as evil. She doesn't really seem to be intentionally trying to hurt anyone other than Hornet. It's hard to know exactly where to place Lace. Probably more toward the chaotic side. I can't say evil. I can't really say good either. Honestly, Lace might be closest to purely neutral. We're gonna stick her a little bit over here. She did ultimately act to help bring down Grandmother Silk, which is a good act, I would say. Yeah, I think we're gonna put Lace here. A little bit down the chaotic, a little bit less out on the good. The important thing is that I have completed the Silksong antagonist alignment chart. Let's move on. That means that the final thing I will be doing, looking back at games I played this year, will be for Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World, and it will be a written review. Specifically, an exhaustively thorough written review. Let's get started.